Perfect. So thank you, everyone. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Aditya, and this talk is titled Goro, Translating Go to Other Human Languages and Back Again. A bit about me, I'm a systems engineer at Stripe. So my job is to write open source software for monitoring and reliability, which happens to be pretty much in Go. So I've been writing Go full-time now for the past 5 years, and a lot has changed in that time. So this is from the source code of the Go 1.0 compiler back in 2012. So if you don't write C, there's a lot of unfamiliar stuff there. Let me get rid of that notification. I put DND on. So yeah, there's a lot of unfamiliar stuff there. Like you might be able to get a sense of what's happening, but not completely. And it'd be much harder to write it yourself than to read it if you don't really know C. And this was a huge barrier to contributing to the Go project, and everyone really recognized it. Like, think about it. We're here to contribute to the Go project. We already know and use Go, so why should we need to learn a whole different language, C, just to write the language that we actually want to, use? And so we rewrote the entire Go compiler from C to Go, and that was released in 2015. We did that largely with a C to Go translator that translated the code automatically, and the remainder was done by hand. So there were little fine-tuning fixes here and there. And so there's a very great talk from the very first GopherCon by Russ Cox about this. But that only removes one language barrier, and there's still one more to contributing to Go. Go development, as it turns out, happens almost entirely in English. That's true both of the official Go project, but also of popular projects that use Go, like Docker, Kubernetes, or Grafana, and more. And a person's ability to contribute to these projects is going to be greatly limited if they don't have a working grasp of English, and in particular, of reading the Latin script. Because even reading the code, understanding what char and scale mean, that's something that you and I might take for granted, but even reading the Latin script might be an extra challenge for some people. So since computers are here to make our lives easier, let's see what computers can do to fix that. In the Go community, we already have a lot of people who don't speak English as their first language, or very fluently, or in some cases speak English at all. So for example, the Chinese Go community has translated the official Go documentation into Chinese, complete with the iconic Go Gopher mascot. And there are other projects you can find on GitHub in which the README or the comments and the issue tracking, those all happen in Chinese. And last year in GopherCon Brazil was a bilingual conference, and that had talks both in English and in Portuguese. So it's great that Chinese and Brazilian Gophers have developed thriving communities for themselves, but fragmenting resources is bad for open source development. Fragmentation means duplicated work and incompatible interfaces. So how do we bridge these communities? So to answer this question, we can look at Goro. Goro is an extension of the Go compiler and toolchain to support Bengali. And the name Goro is an idiomatic translation of the English name Go. And I chose Bengali because it's a language that my family speaks, but more so than that, it's the second most most commonly used language in India after Hindi, and it's also the national language of Bangladesh, which together makes it actually the 7th most widely spoken language in the world. But nothing that I'm presenting here is actually unique to Bengali. So for the hack day today, if you're looking for things to work on, think about how you might want to translate this and do a variant for your own language as well. We'll see what that means in a moment. So we'll start with this. This is a very familiar HelloWorld program that's written in Go. And here's the equivalent program that's written in Goro. Now, we've left the identifier names intact, but the keywords are all now in Bengali. And yes, if you eagle-eyed Gophers will notice that true is not actually a keyword in Go, which is why it's still written in English here. People are sometimes surprised to learn that. But the first challenge here is that we need to get this program to run. Like, of course, if we try to feed this to the standard Go compiler, it's not going to know what to do with these keywords. Well, it turns out that Go's source code is all UTF-8, so the compiler actually has no trouble dealing with non-ASCII characters in Go programs. And remember, now that we've rewritten the Go compiler from C to Go, the Go compiler is written in Go, which means that the Go compiler is just a Go program, and so it has no trouble dealing with non-ASCII keyword definitions. There are a few internal checks that ensure that non-Latin and non-alphabetic characters are excluded from keywords, but it turns out that you can just disable those without any issue. There's like one test that you have to delete, and everything else just works fine. There's a test that specifically checks for like what would be an invalid character, so you just need to get rid of it. And so we just extend Lexer to handle the Bengali translations of each keyword. And so there's a reason that I'm giving this talk at a Go conference and not like a Python conference. And it's true, I love Go, I've been writing it for 5 years now, but more than that, this is actually literally not something you can do in Python, not so easily, not so simply. Because even in the original Go compiler, which is written in C, this would have been much harder, because this is all being done purely by the lexer. The parser has no idea that anything has changed. The parser still sees the same tokens and identifiers that it was seeing before. And you can't do that with most of the languages because they use flex-based lexers. And lex and flex don't support multi-byte code points. They only support ASCII or extended ASCII. And so some of these translations, by the way, were straightforward, but some are really fun to do. Like fall through, like think about how do you translate fall through from, like idiomatically into another language. So for those of you who speak other languages besides English, try and think about how you might translate Go keywords into those languages, what the idiomatic or natural counterparts would be. It can be quite entertaining. So now that we've made those changes, here's that HelloWorld program in practice. So you can see there's the Goro HelloWorld, and there we go. We can run it. It runs. So I appreciate the applause, but that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is that we need to be able to translate it. And so our goal is to defragment the open source community, and for translation, Go already has a handy utility for formatting source code called GoFormat. And now we normally just use it to prevent bike shedding over things like the tabs versus spaces argument. But think about it. Like if I want to use tabs and you want to use 2 spaces, we can still work together because we just need to set up GoFormat to automatically format our code on save, and we just commit a canonical version. And then I don't even need to know that you're one of those weirdos who uses 2 spaces, and like I'm one of the better people who uses. You don't need to know that I'm one of the better people who uses tabs. So GoFormat, GoFormat can actually handle a lot more than just indentation preferences. It can do things like removing unnecessary parentheses. And it's syntax aware, so it knows never to change code semantics, which is a simple way of saying that it's a great way for performing fully isomorphic translations of source code. So we can actually extend it and repurpose it really easily for translating English Go code into Bengali or Bengali Go code into English. And so that's what GopherCon does. So let's actually translate that Goro program back into original, like English Go. So we start off with the normal program, and now we have GopherCon, which will run on that program and produce the English counterpart. And if you don't believe me, we can actually write that to a separate Go file and then try running it with the standard Go compiler. There. So we translate, thank you. So we just translated Go from English into a Go program from English into Bengali and back again. And so the same way that you don't need to know that we have different indentation preferences, we shouldn't even really need to know that we have different language preferences either. Because again, to the computer, to the compiler, it's all really the same thing at the end of the day. Koro means that you only ever need to be able to look at source code in your own language. And so our language preferences are no more of a barrier between you and me than our indentation preferences are. And that's the way it should be. So we translated the keywords, but you'll notice that we didn't touch everything, like the package and variable names. I won't go into this into too much detail, but it turns out that variable names and function names are already highly structured. And so we can actually take advantage of that in the translation step and translate those as well. We might not get everything for free, but we can certainly get a lot of it. And GoFormat already gives us the mechanisms in which to do this. It gives us the building blocks to make the renaming transformations like these. So there are a lot of different steps that we could take including non-English speakers more in open source Go development. And making, if anyone's interested in working on this in the Hack Day, highly recommend it. Come talk to me. I can show you. It was pretty easy to do. But just to drive home again a little bit of how important this is, remember that 95% of the world doesn't speak English as their first language, and 89% doesn't even speak English at all. So if this conference were perfectly representative of the world in every way, only 150 people would even be able to understand me speaking right now. And all but 75 would be listening to me speak in what's to them a foreign language. So let's make Go the first programming language that's truly accessible to everyone, no matter what language we speak. We have the opportunity to bridge the language divide in a way that no other programming language has ever been able to do. Thank you.